Welcome to the Investor Fuel Real Estate Investing Show, where I interview the nation's top real estate entrepreneurs, industry leaders, and other amazing entrepreneurs to help educate and inspire you to take your business and your life to the next level. My goal is to add tremendous value to you during every single episode of this show. If you get value, I'd love it if you subscribe on your favorite podcast player, subscribe on YouTube, and my very favorite, please share this with your community so we can impact even more entrepreneurs. Let's start today's show. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the show. Today, I'm here with Robert Hart, who's also a DFW native here, a local. I guess, I don't know if you're native or not, but not many are native to DFW, but some are, I guess. But we're going to be talking about kind of getting clarity around your rental strategy and share some lessons learned from the trenches, if you will, of not only being a property manager, being a rental owner, being a real estate entrepreneur that has a ton of experience. So, Robert, great to see you today.
Thank you, sir. Good to see you as well.
Yeah. So, a little interesting tidbit. So, I've done almost 2,000 podcasts over the last 13 years, and it's very rare that I don't interview somebody that I already know or at least know of. And you and I are fast friends here. We just met about 15 minutes ago. So, looking forward to getting to know you a little bit better today. So before we kind of jump into this, you've got a lot of different experiences that we talked about in the real estate space. Like, maybe just tell us a little bit about your background, about how you got to where you are today.
Yeah. So when I was a broke college kid, my roommate at the time had already graduated because at the time, a couple of years after the fact, I got out of the Navy. I started college, right? And so my roommate said at one point in time he wanted to own 10 duplexes. I'm like, that kind of sounds dumb. You just want to own. I didn't understand it, right? And so at the time, I'm aging myself here, but Barnes and Nobles and Borders were very popular companies.
Yeah.
So I ran down there and I bought every book I could, and I would read them over and over and over. And at the time, I was, I think, 25 years old. And I graduated college. I chased money. I got the highest paying job I could find. And so at the age of 30, I bought my first owner occupied property. And about 6 months after that, I bought my first investment property. I came under the threshold because Obama at the time had a $8,000 credit. They actually send you a check in the mail. So I hadn't filed my taxes yet for the year, so I still was within that threshold of income limits in the first-time homebuyer program. So they sent me a check for $8,000, which essentially covered my down payment for that townhouse. It was just me and my dog. I just lived in one room, bachelor style. And again, about 6 months after the fact, I bought my first duplex. And so I had that. I bought that when I was 30, and I sold that when I was 42. So I had it. Let's call it 12 years. And so I sold it a couple years ago. And since then, when I bought it for $115,000. Each side I rented for $700. There were 2 up in Aubrey, off of 613 Cherry Street. You can look it up later if you'd like to. But 2, no garages, real simple, probably C-class property. And when I sold it, the rents had doubled to $1,400 a piece. And so before I'd sold it, I did full rehabs on after the tenants moved out, painted the exterior, new HVACs, new windows, all that stuff to maximize rent. And along the way, I had done a couple of cash out refis and started buying properties, from there on out using that money. Initially, we didn't talk about this, but when I first started buying, you know this better than I do, it was like shooting fish in a barrel. You could buy stuff that was turnkey, ready to go, super cheap, great rent rates. And then as time progressed, it got more and more difficult to do because the prices went up and the rents didn't go up. They weren't in parity, I guess you could say. And so I started investing down in Fort Worth area, Tarrant County. I didn't like that as much, and so I sold those, came back up to Denton County, but I was scared to do value-add property. I'd never done a full rehab, but in order to be able to do what I wanted to do, I had to make that leap, and so I did it. And after the first one, it wasn't that bad, and so lessons were learned, and then you just progress, from there and keep going. I've used a couple different GCs throughout the years. I used one GC. He had great prices initially, right? And then as we would go, his prices increased. I met another guy. He was a painter, and I helped turn him into a GC. For example, the second project we did together, instead of using the P-trap kit for underneath the sink, right, that you buy it as a kit, he just used a flex pipe and hooked it up. I said, no. I said, we can't do that. We have to buy the kit. And so it was good because his prices were good, but I had to go back after him and check all these things. And so as time went on, his prices got to be the same as my old GC. So I ended up going back to my old GC. And we talked previously about clay pipes and cast iron pipes. And so I didn't learn that hard lesson until about 5 or 6 years ago, because a lot of these properties pre-1980 or so are essentially hitting end of life with these cast iron pipes with leaks. And, these leaks cause, North Texas properties in general have foundation issues because of the clay. And
Right.
so these leaks are causing excess foundation issues on top of the clay issues that we already have. And so,
Yeah.
having to go repipe a house like that, it's going to be an easy $20,000. I haven't done one in a few years. I'm sure it's gone up since then, but
Yeah. Well, let's talk about some things that really move the needle for rental owners, right? Let's talk a little bit about property management. So I outsource mine to somebody that I know. I mean, generally most people they hate property management. They don't want to do it themselves. It's the lesser of the evils to outsource it, but they know they're not being watched as closely as they would if they did it themselves. There's all these trade-offs, right? So not only were you doing some of your own, you started a property management company, and I know you've sold it now, but grew that to, I think you said 900 doors or so. Let's just talk first about just the importance of solid property management to a landlord. And then let's talk about some of the pros and cons of doing it yourself. But first, let's talk about, from your perspective, because you've been an investor and a property manager, of how important that is to a rental property owner.
I honestly don't know which is more, and this is going to sound weird to some people that are listening. I don't know which is more important, either the asset itself or the property manager, right? Because they can kill you.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, they can hardcore kill you, right? Because you also have to think about incentives. Because, if say a repair order comes in, right, and it's like, oh, we need to send out the plumber for this or whatever, instead of taking the time to possibly troubleshoot it somewhat with the tenant, some managers will just send a plumber out, even versus just sending a handyman out first, because the stark difference in hourly rate between a handyman and a plumber, right? And then not only just that, not only just troubleshooting it, but figuring out where the fault and responsibility lies. Do we go back and bill the tenant back for this because they were dumb? Or do we just put the onus on the owner and just bill the owner for it? Most times they just bill the owner for it, and the owner doesn't pay attention, or they don't read their owner statements. None of that stuff. Might not look at owner statements for 6 or 8 months, and then come back and like, hey, what happened here? By then, nobody remembers anything from even 2 weeks ago, especially if you're managing a fair amount of doors.
Yeah. And one of the big things is really, like, a lot of people, like, vacancy doesn't show up on the P&L other than just lack of revenue. So, a lot of times people will say, well, if I were doing it myself, I know what would happen is we wouldn't turn properties as fast as a professional company should be able to. And so we'd be looking at, hey, it costs us a lot less to get it done. But it's like, yeah, it also set vacant for an extra month than it would have anyway. I mean, maybe give the perspective of the property manager side on, and everybody's probably different, but the sense of urgency to kind of turn those things around.
Yeah, because whenever you get those owner statements, all it does is have a zero line. It doesn't show the mortgage payment and the escrow for the taxes and insurance and all that stuff. And again, most of these owners, a lot of times they're out-of-state owners, or they couldn't sell their house, so they turned it into a rental. And so they're just, trying to understand it and get their feet wet. But yeah, so going back to incentives, the property manager is incentivized to turn it as quickly as possible to get re-rented, right? So they get that lease fee. And when they turn it, you also need to consider being a market maker. What I mean by that is, do they have their own people do it? And what kind of rates are they charging? Or do they outsource it, right? Because
Right.
I went through, I think, 3 different property managers before we started our own. I just got tired of it not getting taken care of properly and not notifying me about this, and not putting proper, not vetting proper tenants and things like that. Because again, it goes back to, I don't even know which is more important, the asset itself or the operator that you have helping you manage your stuff.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times these property management companies, they don't even own properties. A lot of times they're just young kids or college kids, and they're like, okay, this comes in, and they're order takers. That's it.
Right.
They don't think about the owner on the other end.
Yeah. Yeah. You could say that, by the way, I know you also own a brokerage. You could say that about most agents too, is they also don't, they might own their primary residence, but they don't own real estate pretty often, most of the time, right?
It's funny that you say that, because that's true. Most of the agents, they never buy anything along the way, and they're agents for, if they're good, they're agents for 30 or 40 years, and they stay agents for 30 or 40 years because they don't buy any of their own product. Yeah. Here's a good one for you. You know where Savannah is on 380?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
It's in Denton County. It's real close to Providence Village, where all that traffic is. It's terrible up there. This agent friend of mine, she calls me in March of 2020. This is a good story. She calls me in March of 2020, and this owner that she knows, she helped him buy the property. She helped his daughter find a rental property. He called her. He's a wedding singer, and he goes, "Hey, everything is dried up," or they have a cover band too, I guess. And so all these bars are shutting down. Nobody's doing anything. He needs to sell his house. He hadn't been there in like 2 months anyway, because he's traveling a lot for work. She goes, "Can you buy his house?" And I can always buy a house. I've got plenty of dry powder. What do you got? She should have bought this house. She didn't do it. Anyway.
I didn't think about it.
Yeah. She just wanted her 3%. That's all she cared about was her 3%. Yep. Anyway. Yep. So we start, the house at the time was probably worth $250 or so. And keep in mind, this is March of 2020. The world is shutting down. Everything's shutting down. Like, this is going to be a really good idea or a really stupid idea. Regardless, I've got the cash, and I got the cash reserves to float me however long I need to go. So he started at like, I don't know, 200 or so. And I hit him in the shorts at like 167, 395, something similar to that. He took it. I bought it, closed in like 2 weeks. I found out after the fact that I didn't like this subdivision very much. So I had the property for, back up, 3-bed house, 2.5 bath. I turned the game room into a 4th bedroom. It had a cutout as soon as you go in it. I turned that into a closet. We put a window in there, sold it. After about 3 years, I netted right around 150. I still had the initial investment, but I netted around 150 after about 3 years on the property, paid long-term capital gains on it. It didn't cash flow hardly anything because I had some really high maintenance tenants while we were in there. Going back to putting the onus on the owner, who breaks a toilet from, like the bowl literally cracked. I'd never seen that happen. And this wasn't like a 50-year-old house even. The house was 15, 20 years old. Anyway, they complained that when they sat on it, it just randomly cracked. You know how just stuff randomly breaks?
Right.
Anyway, So sold that and hadn't invested back in there. But I think it's always important, in real estate investors, if you're a long-term investor and you're not just having one and two properties, we always think of opportunity cost. You got this cash sitting there. It's like, what can I do with it? What can I do with it? It's always great, in my opinion, to sit on cash if there's nothing really good to pull the trigger on because of situations like this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's you're willing to jump on opportunities that you wouldn't be able to otherwise. So.
Absolutely. Cool. I've never used hard money. I know when you're starting out, a lot of investors do. It's a great product out there if you know what you're doing, but it can also bite you if you don't.
Yeah. So let's talk about, obviously property management, critical. So let's just to wrap that one up. talk about, I know you sold a property management company, but like what do you advocate now? Like people should do it themselves, or do it themselves after a certain number, or do it themselves up until a certain number, or what do you, I basically tell people I don't think they should do it ever themselves, but unless you want to own a property management company, like why would you be in that business? But what are your thoughts on that?
I'm with you. I never self-managed. Even when I bought that first duplex, when I lived in my little townhouse, I found a manager. I didn't know anything about it. You guys take care of it. There's all kinds of laws out there, and it varies from like city to city and county. I mean, it it's almost an impossible job, if not an impossible job.
It's a tough business. Yeah. And it's, yeah. So let's talk about just navigating these waters, that are hitting everybody, really nationwide. Also, especially here in Texas, as property taxes. There's a lot of benefits to living in Texas, but property taxes is not one of them. Property taxes and insurance that are eating a lot of guys alive. So how do you navigate those things these days?
Yeah, you're exactly right. The insurance, and I don't even know which one's worse, right? Because some of these renewals come up, and we talked about that house I got in Roanoke. It went from $1,200 to 2,000 something, and then the following year it was like close to $6,000 for a renewal.
That's crazy.
My uncle is a broker, and we shop every year, and I'm always trying to find the deals, even if the premium is like $150 cheaper somewhere else. I'll swap, because if you got 20 properties, for example, all that stuff adds up over the course of the year. Do the work, save on the yield. But yeah, from what I understand, a lot of landlords that got in the business, especially that have a higher basis, that got into the business over the last probably 2-3 years, they might have some good long-term fixed low rate debt, right? However, the insurance, the taxes are creeping up on people, thinning their margins out. So we've seen a lot of supply. I think like 50 or 60,000 in DFW units have come to market in the last close to a year or so, which I think there's still some that's hitting, but a lot of that stuff's going to dry up, I think, in the next 8 to 12 months. Mm-hmm. And from what I understand is there's not a lot of projects on the horizon because you can see it coming 2-3 years out with these bigger projects. So a lot of these owners, from what I understand, are looking to exit and sell and turn these back into owner occupied stuff. That's going to take a lot of the supply out of rental properties that are available, which if the supply dries up, then what happens to the rent costs?
Right.
Then we're looking at more rent bumps over the next 2 or 3 years. So I'm more of a fan of holding on to it, thin your margin out, even if your cash on cash goes down to 4 or 5%. Hold on to it, because after all the dust settles, you're going to be thankful that you did.
Yeah. And it's interesting because every market, if you were to look like nationwide, this is why you can't listen to like national stats or even like large statewide stats, is like national stats are, I would presume that home ownership is generally going down now. Like it's just interest rates are high. It's harder to be an owner, but, that might be different in DFW, for example, where we're at, because there's such an influx of population. Like even if the pricing seems high, it's low relative to where that person's coming from, especially if they come from California or somewhere else. Right. And so I don't know what home ownership stats are in DFW. We could probably Google it and kind of find out. But that's why you always have to look at your local stats, because that could change dramatically from national stats that we all look at. Let's talk a little bit about like what's the right rental property, because you and I were talking before this about this illusion of the cheap property. It seems cheap and the rent to value ratio is high, but they also turn more. There's less pride of ownership. And so did you make some mistakes there? I mean, I know I did. So did you make some mistakes there?
Lessons were learned. The good ones aren't cheap and the cheap ones aren't good.
That's right. Yeah. And by the way, you could have the best A-class property in the world too, and it doesn't mean that person's not going to be a slob, but less likely to be, I would say. The reality is it appears like if you were to just look at it academically, that those properties would cash flow the worst. However, there's less turnover. The values tend to go up more on the A and B class properties. Like there's not as much appreciation in C and D class areas as there are in kind of A and Bs, I guess. And so share some of your lessons learned there.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can go look at certain classes of properties and go look over the last, like, let's call it 30 years or so. And if you adjust for inflation, a lot of these lower end properties are worth the same amount in asset value or even less than they were, again, adjusted for inflation 30 or 40 years ago, as compared to the A and B class properties that have a consistent year over year of, depends upon how you pencil whip it, 3 to 5% in appreciation, depending upon the town and the location of things. But yeah, I mean, you can even have more in certain pockets of like Dallas, for example. But yeah, and so looking on the spreadsheet, it might be a spreadsheet killer as far as the cash flow goes, because everybody, talks about escaping the 9 to 5. And so when they go start looking at different properties and evaluating them on their spreadsheet, like, oh, well, I don't see any point in buying, this A-class property, because a lot of people talk about the 1% rule or 1% or more type of thing. Yeah. But, you go to buy this property and it has turnover. Well, congratulations. As soon as that tenant left or got evicted or didn't pay or whatever, you got a squatter moving in or breaking windows or vandalism. Take your pick.
Yeah. Robert, why don't you share your thoughts on it? Because I know you own a brokerage, you're adding offices and licenses across lots of states and stuff. And one of the things you were talking to me about before we started was how you do lead gen. So you generate leads and, worst case scenario, it could be a listing, but you might get a first crack at possibly a wholesale deal or a buy and hold or even a fix and flip. And I think there's been this convergence of kind of the traditional agent business and investors, like more and more investors, especially in states that require it now, have to get licensed. And I think there's a lot of, I saw a stat recently that there's more agents in America than there were houses that sold last year. So the average agent, on average, I know there's people that crush it and there's people that do zero, a lot that do zero, but on average, agents are struggling to make money as well. And so they're basically kind of going down towards the investors. The investors are coming up towards them. But just talk about that phenomenon that you kind of see going on there and how it might make sense for more agents to get into the investing business or seek that out. And you just talked about you worked with an agent that never even thought, it didn't even occur to her that she should have just bought the house herself. But just talk about that convergence that you see going on there.
Yeah, so I think the stat official for last year was like 76, 74, 78, some percent like that of all agents last year did not do one single deal. Right. And so it's going to get worse. The new stats just came out. Pending home sales is at their lowest level since NAR has ever started recording it. And so you had this huge influx of investors, a huge influx of agents that got in the business over the last 3 or 4 years. It was relatively easy money. I mean, and so they're finding out what it's like now. And it's always done this. You've always had these cycles.
It's a cycle,
no different. Yeah, no different than real estate. And so what you're talking about is a Pareto distribution where essentially 20% of the agents do 80% of the deals, right? And so you're seeing a lot of agents get out of the business now. I went back and I reached out to some agents that I bought houses from over the last year or two. I'm like, hey, I know this person. Let me reach out to them, see if they want to join the brokerage. And I text them and I never heard anything back. I'm like, okay, maybe they just don't like what we're having to offer or whatever. And I go and look at their license and it's now inactive. So you're seeing more and more agents get out now and they're going to, get W-2s or whatever. So there's a lot of that going on right now. But as far as us, most of our agents, still a fair amount of them are part-time. We got one that's going full-time in the next month or so, but the full-time agents that we have, they're still eating pretty healthy. They've got their own pipeline that they've built, or they use our leads. We've got a team of cold callers that we target homeowners for a specific demo. And so those leads flow in. So we just try to hit them, meaning the homeowners, before anybody else gets to them. Agent outreach in a sense. So it's not expired. It's not for sale by owners. It's people that might be more motivated to downsize or sell or, or whatever.
Yeah.
The last two wholesale deals that we did was because one guy had paid his mortgage in like 3 or 4 months, so he needed to get out. And then the other one, she was behind like a month or two or so. And so we found quick exits for those folks, and they still got paid, and we made a little bit of cash and, moved on. But
Yep.
More agents need to put more tools in their tool their tool belt to be able to satisfy the clients that they come across, because not everybody wants traditional, right? And so we've got a couple other products that we offer. We guarantee your house will sell in 120 days. Because we're attached to that mortgage company, there's certain things that we can do that the traditional agent doesn't have the ability to do.
Sure. Yeah. I think that we're going to see a lot more convergence there of just more ways to make money in real estate. So like you said, some people just want to be done now, and a traditional agent can't help with that. And a lot of investors look at a lot of deals to find that one. And if they can at least list it for them or refer it to a listing to make some money to kind of get some of their bait back from a marketing standpoint, that's not a bad thing either. So a lot of that convergence going on there. Robert, so if folks wanted to connect with you, learn anything more about you or find a way to do deals with you or anything like that, where could they go?
Heartoftexas.com or heartoftexas.co. We own both of those. They can shoot me an email directly if they'd like to at my investor email address, robert.hart.property@gmail.com. If they even just want me to take a look at a deal that they're looking at, I don't mind looking at it for them, make sure they're not getting in over their head or paying too much or, however I can help. I mean, even if it's just me, pulling some comps for them and sending the comps and say, hey man, look at your stuff, look at your buy box and know what you're getting into.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, hey, thanks for spending some time with us today and sharing your knowledge.
You bet. Thank you, sir.
All right, everybody. Hope you have a great day. We'll see you on the next show. Thanks for joining us for today's show. You can learn more about the amazing benefits of the Investor Fuel Mastermind community, including surrounding yourself with hundreds of other rock stars, 100% financing on your deals, and members-only discounts from vendors you're likely already using that, as a member of Investor Fuel, will save you more than the cost of your membership. Visit investorfuel.com to learn more. You can also check out the show's notes for access to free resources, how to get access to world-class lead generation, and even how to work with me directly one-on-one. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss another episode. See you on the next show.